And three, two, one. Okay, so it's connecting. We are live. Hey, it's Expat in Lima here with Piero Morosini, the next candidate for pretty much Congress in Peru here, as well as posible el presidente en el futuro también. So let's get to know him a little bit more and catch up because Piero's a really good friend of mine, and we have a lot in common as well as a lot to catch up because of COVID and all the bullshit. I'm going to be very frank, with the viewers here, so everyone can hear an honest person with an honest conversation. So, anyways, Piero, it's great to see you, buddy.
Well, it's great to see you, Lansen. I love your hat. Make Peru great again, irrespective of whichever side of politics one is in. It's a great phrase. I mean, make Peru great again, and I do believe that it's a very how can I say? It's the right phrase for the challenges that we're facing right now in Peru, in Lima. Because you are here. Well, I am a candidate for Congress right now, and I thank you for your thoughts. Candidate for Congress, not for president, but we'll see what happens. And the situation, I think, is not so good right now in Peru with this COVID second wave thing. We used to meet in nice artisan beer bars in Lima, which there are many and they're very, very good. And now we're just having, beers on the Zoom. And that's kind of a good way to symbolize what's going on without getting too depressed, right? Because,
Right.
we cannot sort of be sort of close to each other and that sort of a thing. Now, the situation right now, I want to say it from the outset, in Peru is that I think the government right now is a lot bigger a problem than COVID.
Okay.
We all know that COVID is a bad thing. We all know that pandemics is a terrible thing. But we all know that the different countries have been handling this situation in different ways, and one have been doing better than others. And I think the US is a very good example because the US, for us Peruvians, is not really a country. I mean, US is more like a continent, right? It's like more than 50 countries, and some states have been doing extremely well. And I must be a little bit of a fan here of Florida. There's a lot of Latin people in Florida. And you are a Florida guy, and so we are maybe biased because we're Latin, because you're also Latin to me, but and I mean it in the best way, as you know. But Florida is doing really well, I think, if you look at the statistics and all that. But New York is doing really bad. Unfortunately, we are in Peru more like New York, and I wish we were like Florida.
Right.
We are the worst country in South America in terms of, GDP fall. We are the worst in terms of there's no oxygen. The mortality rate is the highest. The contagious rate is the highest. And it's all, apparently, it's all bad news, right? And I think a lot of it is true. Now, you and I are very sensitive to the touristic industry because expats in Lima is kind of a, within this whole cultural and touristic context of, global nomads, moving around and sort of learning and sharing, right? And the touristic industry in Peru is close to basically, flatline. Our funny government, for lack of a different word, is setting very strict quarantines 2 weeks. If you are a foreigner, you want to come into Peru, you need to be 2 weeks in quarantine. I don't know how you made it. I mean, when you came back to Peru, maybe you came back before this was put in place, but if you are a tourist and you were trying to come to Peru early this year, after the first wave, everything seemed to be getting back to normal, then everybody canceled. And there are 4 million families and 1.5 million, startups and small companies that depend on tourism in Lima. And we're doing so well in tourism. I mean, we get the highest ratings everywhere. United States, strict, very demanding magazines are ranking Peru always in fabulous places. And who would have thought that the biggest threat here was our government? And I think that that's the way we start right now. We're in the bottom, and to me that's the good news, because that means everything from here is going to be upwards, right?
Yeah, you can't get any further down than here, right? So it's only got to go forward and up. And I agree. Unfortunately, tourism is such a vital lifeline of this country, right? I love this country. I live here. I support it. And I'm very passionate to do what's right for the citizens and the local people from all different classes. I highly recommend anyone that's listening that lives in the United States to come out to Peru and live here for a couple years, and just enjoy the experiences, enjoy the food, and enjoy the culture. And you'll grow up 10 times, 20 years your age, for sure. But that being said, the tourism is a vital lifeline. It's unfortunate that they've cut that lifeline. And it makes me think of some of these amazing TripAdvisor 5-star companies that may not actually be around come, tourism season, come May, June, right? When everyone wants to go to Machu Picchu, they might be under. And how do you replace that? It's really unfortunate, because Peru has so many great places to go visit and see. And, tourism is similar to Florida, right? You brought up Florida. Look what Florida is doing. They have Walt Disney World there. And then Walt Disney World is like this epicenter. And then there's so many other tourism attractions like Universal, and then local entertainment sites around that place. I lived in Orlando for a while. I know that. It's like a big circle, right? And you got Walt Disney World in the middle. And what they've done is they've made sure that they had still traffic, whether it's international travel or domestic travel, visiting those parks, visiting those tourist attractions, and just doing it in a very responsible manner, right? And allowing adults making, grown-up decisions in terms of, do they want to take the risk and maybe getting COVID or not, rather than making the government or having the government, make those decisions for you, like the other states you mentioned. It would be great if Peru actually did that, where they allowed tourists to make their own decisions and essentially enter and enjoy at their own risk. And by the way, they might be seeing environments that have been flourishing over the past 12 months that you've never seen before. Imagine the wildlife now, right? I was in the jungle in Puerto Maldonado about a year and a half ago, and I really enjoyed it. And we were tracking monkeys. And imagine how many monkeys are there now, how much wildlife is there. There's a big mining issue. I'm sure there's probably illegal mining still going on there. But, this has been a blessing in disguise for Mother Nature, right? No one's not really tampering these places because they're not visiting them. So it allows Mother Nature to flourish again. And at the same time, indirectly, we have this carbon footprint that is much lower the past 12 months because nobody's traveling, right? So what we've done the last 12 months, unfortunately, has probably done a lot for global warming for the next 20 years, if you think about it. But that being said, I wish they would allow and promote tourism in a responsible manner, not just international from the U.S., but local, right? Argentina, Chile, all these neighboring countries that could have some incentives. There could be some cross-culture incentives, right? Go to Argentina, Mendoza, they're obviously their currency is not doing too well right now. Promote tourism cross-channeling, knowing that it's the similar language, not saying similar culture, but kind of, it smells like it. And just try to come up with solutions rather than stopping full tilt and, hey, let's all get scared about COVID. Let's go back to the science. If you want to talk about science, science is all about data and statistics. If you look at statistics and data, what does the data tell you? The data tells you that there's very low risk actually of dying from this thing unless you have these complications that statistically only a handful of percentages actually have those complications. So just go and make it happen. I'll give you a quick poll. Have I encountered someone that has COVID? Yes, I encountered some people that are young in Florida that had COVID, and they said, hey, I caught it like a month ago, and now I'm talking to you, right? Have I had COVID yet? God forbid, I have not, okay? Have I known people that had it here? Honestly, they were all false positives, the ones that told me that they had COVID, and the next day they said, well, some Chinese test and it wasn't right. So honestly, I haven't actually known a good friend of mine that actually has had COVID. But even if they've had it, I don't know anybody that's died from COVID in my own little circle, okay? So that's just me in my own small bubble. You can do your own analysis and say, hey, are you sounding similar to what Lanson's saying? If so, right there, that's statistics. That means that the data says that, you know what, it's low to medium risk. Go have fun, enjoy your life. Quit doing this whole lockdown thing because you're destroying the economy, and there's going to be other unintended consequences, like people that are losing jobs that now are going to go kill themselves and drug themselves up with whatever and then commit suicide. That's worse than catching COVID, because COVID, you at least caught it, but then you didn't die from it. Now you're actually, mentally creating mental disease or mental illness that, there's so many other unintended consequences that could come from just arresting people in their environments, and that's not what a government should be doing, right? Let's make America great again. Let's make Peru great again. And this is all back from Ronald Reagan, but even before that, probably Thomas Jefferson or Washington. It's really just being the best citizen you can, right? That's what we're trying to promote. So I'll stop there.
Well, you're absolutely right on basically all what you're saying. I mean, I'm taking notes, mental notes of that, and the stats that you mentioned are absolutely on target, right? It's a very bad pandemic in the sense that not necessarily in the sense of the mortality, that's what you're saying, but in the sense of the of this whole sanitary initiatives and quarantines and lockdowns and measures that come with it, right? And some of the hysteria that has taken place in some countries about this whole thing. Now,
also, I'm going to add too, real quick. I want to add something. I traveled to maybe 10 locations, different locations over the past year in different states, different countries. And I had at least over 5, maybe 7 different COVID tests before flying, after flying. Not once did I have a positive, of course. But also, I did everything in my means to be a responsible adult. In addition to that, I went to all these different locations. Right. And guess what? Even in contacting, you know how social I am, right? Even in connecting with family or connecting with friends, it was very small sample size in terms of people actually catching COVID, right? And there are some people that didn't have any masks, like Florida, or some people that did have masks, like Vermont, and guess what? The data showed that it's not as big of an issue as you think it is. And if you did catch it, you're probably okay, unless you have these real rare circumstances. So, yeah.
Well, it would be interesting to know if someone like you has the perception that here in Peru, I mean, many people would share the same perspective vis-a-vis COVID that you have just.
Well, I would share my experience, right? So forget about the news, because the news just wants to scare you, right? And they all have their own opinion. but I'll show you my experience. I went to Florida, I went to Vermont, I went to Maine, I flew to Puerto Rico, I was all these different airports, you know, I got tested more than 5 or 7 times. I talked with different people in different cities, and guess what? I didn't hear hardly any stories about COVID. And now I'm back in Peru, and I still don't hear that. So you can watch the news and be in a corner and scare yourself to death, or you can just do what I'm doing, which is, okay, when I go shop, I wash my hands, I'll take a shower if I feel like I was out too long, whatever it was, make sure that, you know, I've got service people coming here, they have masks, we take their temperature. Even that, I think, is still overblown. I still think that is what a responsible adult should be doing, what we're doing, what I'm doing. Take your temperature, wash your hands. Okay, if there was a temperature issue, let's go get checked out. If there wasn't, let's wait until we hear symptoms. Other than that, like, let's not prevent ourselves from actually doing our work, you know?
Well, what I was saying that, not only in the sense that you are saying, but it's my sense that, how can I put it in the best way, that this whole situation of the mismanagement from the government side, I want to be very clear on that, of the COVID pandemics in Peru, has led to people having a perception of the pandemic perhaps a lot worse than what it really is. I don't mean that there are no deaths in Lima or in the rest of Peru as a result of this, but what I mean is that people as a whole feel desperate and feel, let down, not just because of this disease, but from the fact that there are not enough, hospital beds, there are not enough oxygen, there's not enough, tests around. There's not enough of anything, and the vaccines basically have not yet arrived in Peru. The only thing we have had is a scandal, which is very funny. It's a scandal in vaccines in a country that hasn't got any vaccines at all. It's just less than 1 million vaccines that have made it to Peru, the Chinese vaccines. But we have the biggest scandal in South America regarding, the VIP people getting vaccinated against, every moral and ethical sense. So my sense is that all this situation is worsening a lot the perception that we in Peru and how we feel and live this disease, because I feel that if we had the same situation as Chile or as Ecuador, where they got a a health system which is not, same standard as US, but is working. If we had vaccines, if we had started our vaccination big way, I think that people would feel a lot more, quote unquote, relaxed about this whole thing. But the fact that that if you get COVID and you need the basic attention, you are going to basically get screwed in the system. You can die because you don't have oxygen, whereas if you had it, you would just get better in a matter of a couple of days. That situation is what makes me and many Peruvians very, very upset, because it's all man-made. It's all government-made. See my point?
Right.
We were doing a lot better after the first wave. All the indicators were down, down, down. And suddenly a second wave of contagious, start. And everything collapses. And we should not be in this place.
Well, I mean, that's what happened. So we were talking about this maybe a year ago, right? Where
Right.
Peru was on their way to getting cases after the U.S. because of just the seasonality, right? Summer time frame in U.S., winter time frame in Peru. Now that summer is ending in Peru and now that fall is coming, right?
Right.
It's going to get worse before it gets better. And that's just the way it is. That's what happened with the U.S., right? They started peaking in the fall, and they've now been tapering down, maybe because of vaccines, maybe because of other things, but they've been tapering down, and it's pretty much winter is pretty much done and spring starting, right, in March and April. It's going to happen the same way in Peru. So you should expect more cases. At the same time, really, it's just it's an approach to where you need to say, okay, well, we just got to make sure we're staying consistent with our methodologies, but you should expect it, but not get scared about it. Does that make sense? Like, it's going to happen because of weather and all of that. But where we're at now with the vaccines and all the logistics, and yeah, I know there's some issues with the country, and I'm hearing you there. It's still okay. Does that make sense? Like, Peru's probably in the worst situation now because of fall and winter starting, but we're so far advanced in the tech that there could be a surge on getting vaccines to the people that need it, by the way. Okay. Meaning people that are 65 and older, get them the vaccine. Anybody else? No. You don't need it. If you're a frontline worker, maybe. Because there's been they're like the new Marines, right? They're the soldiers. They're the ones working, being around it all the time. Other than that, I shouldn't get it. I don't think you should get it. You're young, you know? So like, I think it needs to be prioritized to the right group.
The way I understand this is that people get vaccinated based on age is because there's a correlation, which tends to be extremely high, between the state of your immunological system and your age, correct? So basically, if you don't have any preconditions like the ones you mentioned, if you basically are an all right person health-wise, the older you get, the weaker your immunological system tends to be, and that's the way it is. If you are in a normal, whatever that means, country, in a normal situation. Now, if you think about the mega,
or you could take like, okay, if someone has more than 3 prescriptions or whatever it is, I don't care what it is, but if you have more than 3 hospital prescriptions that you're taking medication for, there's obviously something wrong with you, right? Because you might have something's wrong with you, right? There's something that you've been trying to mitigate with all these prescriptions. So if you have more than 3 prescriptions, you probably need a vaccine too, because there's probably some adverse issue with your body and how it's working. So maybe prescriptions and age, yeah, those 2 things correlate, right? Because the older you get, the more prescriptions you take. At the same time, if you're some obese person that let itself go or whatever happened, you just got some crazy genetics that unfortunately, you know, you're pretty much a lost cause, and you got more than 3 prescriptions, yeah, you should probably get a vaccine too, because we don't want you dying either. Does that make sense? So other than that, I don't take any prescriptions other than maca, coca, camu. You know, those are like, you know, over-the-counter stuff.
So people should
maybe we should be taking that, because that's what I've been taking, and I've been fine.
Elaborate on that, yeah, because, you know, coca is perhaps one of the best sources of, we're talking here of coca, not cocaine.
Yeah, I'm talking coca. All right, so just to be clear, guys, coca is from the coca leaf, okay? And in Peru, it's legal. And what I get is actually ground up leaves that are turned into powder. And I use that like a energy drink before I go work out. And I'll take maybe a small scoop, mix it in water, drink it like drinking matcha. It's the same thing.
Yeah, and that is calcium. That's organic calcium. So if you get this coca powder, which has got nothing to do with cocaine, absolutely nothing.
There's very small amounts, will be very full disclosure, there's very tiny amounts, but even that, I may get tested. They'll say, well, you have very small traces, but it's not like I just did a line of Coke. You wouldn't
Well,
get the
just
same
for the people
trace.
who are following, right? If you want to make 1 kilogram of pure cocaine, you need to use just about
Other things.
700 kilograms of coca leaf. So 700.
And you need to get illicit chemicals and all this other thing. It's a whole process, you know. So yeah.
So it's, imagine if you got 700 kilos of coffee and you got 1 kilo concentrated caffeine, that would kill you too. So that's for the people to get an idea of what you're
It's a good
talking
point,
about,
yeah.
because
Yeah.
what they are going to think that you are getting strange things into your body. No, it's all natural, and it's one of the best foods that you can ever think. Is the coca powder. You can make cookies with it. You can make anything you want, and that's calcium. Now, camu camu, which is the one you just mentioned, that's a very powerful source of vitamin C, because 1 camu camu, which is very little, is like 10 or 20 limes, right? 10 or 20 limes in terms of C vitamin. And maca is great, you know, in proteins. It's great
Exactly.
in, you
And
know,
that's what and you're right. And so I do my maca after my workout, and then I do my coca before my workout, and my camu. I'll do a little bit of just like fish oil and what's the other one? I like garlic, ajo as well. It's simple.
Yeah,
And then
that's
and I actually do seats. I do salt flushes maybe once a month, where I'll drink a water with salt, and I use the Peruvian salt from Amaras, you know. And so I'm getting spoiled here. I have nice ingredients here in Peru.
yeah.
People should come visit and go visit the salt mines and all that. They'll enjoy it.
Yeah, man, you look great, and I'm sure you're doing great. I mean, just for people to know that the maca is the natural Viagra.
Yeah,
it's a great energizer.
Maca negra. That's what I use.
Exactly. So the Incas, you know, sort of had their things, right? So basically, that's the way it is. But you know, like the lifestyle that you're mentioning is an important variable, because so people should know, and people do know, that, you know, the Latin American mega cities like Lima, Sao Paulo, you know, Mexico City, then you have a very bad quality of air in many places, not all of them, but in many places where people tend to be very populated places in those cities, then you get very bad pollution, a lot of environmental, you know, sounds, and you know, noise, and basically all those things deteriorate your immunological system. So in those cases, I think you have in Lima, for example, a very unusual amount of young people dying of COVID. That should not happen. But when you realize where these people coming from, they tend to spend their lives in this polluted air, doing their work. They tend to transport themselves in completely noisy and cramped places. And I think they have very deteriorated immunological system. So although they may be 20 years old, 30 years old, 35 years old, if you were to talk about the age of their immunological systems, maybe they're 70 years old. And that's the reason why I think in this kind of cities in Latin America, you're going to see some of patterns of vaccination which are different than the ones you mentioned for the US, which is the same as Europe or Japan, where you tend to have a better correlation because the lifestyle is better in those countries. Even if you're in a big city, let's say even if you're in Philadelphia, New York, Chicago, you know what I'm saying, Miami, I mean, you tend to get cars which are all right cars, lots of electrical cars. People are not like ta with their sort of hands all the time. That deteriorates your your immunological system. So you don't have that. You'll have a better correlation. You are young, you are stronger, immunological system, you are old, is weaker. But here in Peru, I mean, you are breathing, to begin with, you are breathing a bad air in the populated districts. Fortunately, you live in a good district, me too, but there are 40 districts in Lima, 42. Maybe about 10 of them are very populated. This San Juan de Lurigancho has got more than 1 million people. It's a district. It's just one district. And Lima has got 10 million people. So imagine San Juan de Lurigancho, you know, it's people are breathing this bad air. And what does COVID do? COVID screws with your respiratory system. That's the first thing it does.
Yep.
So if your lungs are in a poor quality, guess what happens next? You need oxygen. If the stupid government doesn't give permission to the factories, to produce oxygen, which is what happens here. There are 42 facilities which could produce enough oxygen for Peru to export, and not just to give to the local market, but to export. It would be and they don't give them their authorization.
Right.
This is why The Economist, you must remember, The Economist, last year, The Economist, the English American publication, the local South American correspondent is in Lima, it's based in Lima. And he wrote that the former President Vizcarra should be tried for genocide.
Wow.
Because it's hot, it's really serious thing. But this new government has done worse things. And so you really
let's pivot a little bit, Piero. Let's do two things. Stage this a little bit more so it's more focused also towards your campaign. Let's do two things. Let's do a pros and cons. What's currently going on in the government that you think is good, and then what you think is bad, and then align your campaign to those two things. Just let's talk about the COVID, for example. That'd be one topic.
Well, what I think the government is doing well at this point is just one thing. They are not postponing the elections, and that's the only good thing they are doing, because they should go out as soon as possible. You know, the elections are 11th of April, and whoever gets elected should take over on the 28th of July, which is our national day, as you very well know. And there was even talk that they wanted to postpone that on health grounds, on sanitary grounds, which is completely crazy, because there has been like more than 80 elections in the world, presidential elections, under COVID. So that was a poor excuse.
Are they going to have mail-in ballots?
I didn't want to touch that sore. I know that a lot of Americans have this open wound. And,
I'm just curious. Are they gonna have mail-in ballots, or are they not?
We don't have that thing here. Mail-in ballots.
Right.
You have to go. Basically in Peru, it's forbidden to vote any other way which is not in person. And you place your ballot,
that sounds like a very logical, by the way, it sounds very logical. That sounds like a very logical approach, by the way. I actually applaud Peru and saying, you know what, we're not going to change our constitution. We're not going to change our laws. You either want to vote or you don't want to vote. That's fantastic. I think Peru's got it right with that.
Well, that I guess we got right, at least that one. But the bad things that this government has done are basically, in terms of the fight against COVID, I think The Economist makes a good summary of the whole thing. They should be tried for genocide, because they have done exactly what they need to do to kill people. if the government of Peru was like a foreign enemy who wants to destroy the Peruvian population, they would have done exactly the same thing prior to invading Peru. They would have made sure that we have a quarantine second wave so that everybody gets the virus. You know, they would have made sure that oxygen is not produced, which is what happens. They would have made sure that no more hospital beds are available, that no vaccines get inside the country, and they would have told people not to work, okay, and not to get out of their homes, and not to have, you know, fun, and not to have parties, and not to have nothing. So your human condition gets completely obliterated from you, and none of those things are constitutional in Peru. That's why I think if they get tried for genocide or something worse, nobody in the world should gasp. Nobody in the world should get surprised, because that's exactly where they are right now. But I want to talk about, you know, positives, because you and I know that this is a country of very ancient, you know, culture, and you have always been interested in the ancient culture of Peru. I know that for a fact, because you have basically pushed me to show you some of the ancient places in Lima, and you didn't want to know about the modern things. You wanted to know, you know, what's the ancient Waka and the ancient pier. And so I think that this is one opportunity for Peruvians. We are going to show that we are capable of come back in a big way. And that's exactly what we're going to do. And the reason, the motivation for me, I'm a normal citizen, as you know. I never really planned to be in politics. And if the politics of my country were decent, I wouldn't be a candidate. And so the reason we are doing what we're doing is because we really want to participate in the reinvention and the resurrection of Peru. And what I am proposing is that we have the first national law of entrepreneurship, to support, to coach, massive coaching for entrepreneurs in this country from very early age in public school, and massive financing for startups, which are based in business plan, not based on things that you already have. Because like in the US, we have learned that entrepreneurs have to be financed based on their ideas, not based on their guarantees, because they don't get loans, commercial loans. I mean, the people who finance the startups are people who take a position, an equity position, because they believe that this thing is gonna fly. And 1 out of 100 flies and the other 99 die. But that's the way it is. And the one that flies pays for the whole thing and even more, and gets the country to be richer. And that culture we do have, but we don't have a government that supports that culture. And so you see the government and you believe that we're a bunch of ignorance in entrepreneurship. But when you see the people, then you realize we're not. And I am totally embarrassed of these last governments we have had, because I think, to say it in French, they have been a total piece of shit. And we should not have those kind of governments anymore. And that's why I believe that these coming elections are very, very important, because I think that people have another opportunity. And so long as you have this democratic situation, then you have a hope, right? And so we Peruvians have a hope, and that we're going to come back, and we're going to keep, attracting, people like you to come here to sharing our growth, and so that we can keep growing, because we were not doing badly at all before COVID. To be a Latin American, South American country in the context that we are, we were doing pretty well actually, you know, which doesn't mean that we were like, you know, the top sort of country in the world. We're far from it, but well, in some areas they told us we were top, right? Like food, and that's not too far from the truth. But what I mean that the, you know, this whole of Peru is not a machine of welfare as first world countries are. But we were getting there slowly but surely. But this has been a massive sort of setback for us. But the good news is that we're still here and we're still, you know, enthusiastic, and we have not given up really.
I think that's fantastic. With your part with the entrepreneurship, you had talked about the fact that you think entrepreneurship should be pushed more in politics, and it's not. It sounded to me that they were looking for something more of a guaranteed traditional business model to where they can just, you know, have a low risk investment rather than that's more medium to higher risk that actually creates something new rather than copy and paste or family owned. So I get that. What are your thoughts on, I'm going to ask you an honest question. What are your, how would you score from 1 to 10 the ability, let's say the potential of successful entrepreneurs in Peru currently, the current state, from 1 to 10, to actually be creative and create unicorn, you know, from Peru to the world? What's the potential right now?
Well, to create unicorn is it's not very high. To create unicorn, like from 1 to 10, you know, you have to be in the low numbers, right? Uh, Less or equal to 5, to be honest. But the situation to begin with, I mean, to have unicorns, you have to have, as you know better than anybody, you know, Lanson, you have to have a financial system, you know, that allows for such a thing to happen. We got a stock market which is very traditional stock market. Um, you know, it's like dominated by, you know, metals basically and natural resources, and it's getting better. But the most successful companies in Peru, when they get big, they quote in the New York Stock Exchange to source capital. And but there in South America, we have had that situation already. Like Brazil, you can have unicorns in Brazil, and you have had unicorns in Brazil. Argentina is getting there. Chile is trying hard, but not there yet. I think Colombia is going to be very, very surprising. Now Mexico is in their own world, and they are too close to the United States. And so I think that if you're Mexican, you go and you just basically play by the U.S. rules, and everybody, you know, who's entrepreneur in Mexico speaks English, and basically is part of this whole North American thing. So it doesn't really matter there. But Peru is not set for unicorns. It's not set for that kind of financial sourcing, which is public. We don't have that culture. But if you think in a different way, like if you ask me, you know, sector by sector, what do you think about entrepreneurship in the cultural startups? Cultural startups like, you know, gastronomic, tourism. It's not too bad. It's actually pretty good. And from Lima, before COVID, you started to have some very interesting developments in, for example, food chains, like this chicken pollo a la brasa, you know, which expand. Then they start taking these franchise models. So interesting things in tourism, in what I call cultural startups. Um, original denomination products, agro-industrial products, those things, I think Peru has got a pretty bright future. Now, if you think about, technological startups, the way you understand it in the US, I don't think that's, we don't have a big moment for that yet. I don't think that, I believe that maybe things are going to happen over the next 5 years. In the things, for example, that you were getting into, for example, in all the things that have to do with genomic research, biotech, Peru could be a big player there. The important thing the next 5 years is going to be how we manage to reform our educational system. I mean labs, research labs, university research labs. I believe that we have a good intellectual capital, a good base, but we don't have good institutions yet. And I don't think it's a matter of, I really believe that the biggest problem here is the level of ambition. I do believe that the biggest problem is the level of ambition. And when we got in our heads that we wanted to conquer the world with our food, we did. And every Peruvian was out there. But we see the biotech and things like that a little bit sort of still not in our blood yet, to put it in a way. But that thing may be changing. And I think the way to get in there for Peru is going to be the agro-industrial sector, because we are pretty successful in agro-industrial exports. That's going to get a lot bigger after the pandemics, because everybody now wants to eat healthy. And guess what? Peru, owing not necessarily to our intelligence, but maybe more to our stupidity, we ended up with the biggest percentage of virgin agricultural lands in the world. And I mean due to our stupidities, because we managed our country so badly for 20 years during the 70s and 80s that no foreign capital came in Peru. And so there was no money to import biotech seeds, artificial fertilizers. There was no money. And so we're still throwing there, the bird shit, animal shit to fertilize our land and to survive. And when we had the money and we started to try to import that, then there was a big wave of organic food. So people started to say, I want your mango, I want your bananas just as they are. Don't use fertilizer, and I pay you more money. And so we conquered the premium coffee market, we conquered the premium banana market, we conquered the premium mango market, the premium everything market, we conquered. That's not because necessarily we're smart. Sometimes in the world, it pays off to be stupid, It doesn't pay off always to be smart. Sometimes it pays off to be stupid, And I think it paid off to us to be stupid, at least for 20 years. And right now we have all that possibility. So I think that's the way that biotech is going to get into Peru, to the extent that people are going to start sort of applying that for these markets that we have conquered. So the next 5 to 10 years are going to be interesting, I think, in Peru as a whole. I don't know what's going to happen with the financial thing, but somehow, somewhere, the Peruvian entrepreneurs have got to get their money, right? So if we're not going to get a good stock market like the NASDAQ, like a Peruvian NASDAQ, maybe there will be a Colombian NASDAQ or a Chilean NASDAQ. Now, if you have a Colombian NASDAQ or a Chilean NASDAQ, then that's it, man. I mean, you don't need to do anything more than to get in an alliance with them and that's it. So as a whole, I would say it's pretty good in the scale. It would be higher than 5. But unicorn, I think I love to be wrong, but I don't think we're quite there yet. Unicorn, I don't think we're quite there yet.
Yeah, that's interesting with the NASDAQ part, because could that actually work with the different currencies? I guess it could, like someone, okay, whatever the market is, that's where the currency is denominated in. Just like you have in the States, they're in dollars, and you've got companies like Intercore or Pacasmayo and NYSE. So I think Colombia will be an interesting center, and you could link the Pacific Alliance.
That's right. That's exactly what I meant. Yeah, you are absolutely right there.
And what'd be nice is that you could link the Pacific Alliance, and it might be budding to the Brazilian market, because the Brazilian market has been a market that really hasn't gotten any respect for a while, and it still hasn't, because it's, they lumped it in with the BRIC, right? Brazil, Russia, India, China. And China kicked ass. They're now developed, so they're really not part of the BRIC. India is the best, and they're going to be developed. And then Russia is Russia, and they're probably going to be a little bit more mature than India, but India has the demographics that, is going to be at China in the next 10 years. Brazil never actually took off within that group, if you think about it, because of other things. And wouldn't it be great to see a Pacific Alliance NASDAQ, like you say, and I'm using the word NASDAQ purposely, and have that be almost a budding market that's under the fire under the Brazilian market, right? And that might get the New York Stock Exchange to notice that LATAM is actually relevant in the world. Because when you think of LATAM, people think of Brazil. They think of Mexico, but you're right. The whole NAFTA, Mexico being close to US, it really isn't a market, because they kind of tie it in with Canada and the US. So if you're to have a NASDAQ for Colombia, that's the Pacific Alliance that links in Mexico too, and has this pseudo partnership with Brazil, wouldn't that be interesting?
Well, Brazil is in their own world, right? Brazil is like their own little sort of continent.
Right.
And they are kind of like there are drawbacks if in the Brazilian system that doesn't make it appealing to foreigners to be players there because of the lack of transparency and stuff. But it works for them. See what I'm saying? They have their own thing there, which works for them. And there are 200 million people, and there are very powerful companies there. And so somehow it works. It has their own little dynamism. And so they don't, but Peru is different because we are not so big, and we do need that respect that you're saying, right? Like if you're Brazil and they don't respect you for 1 or 2 generations, well, maybe you can sort of live with that because you're such a big country, you're going to improve. And anyway, but Peru is different because we are a smaller country, and we really need to have an international reputation, to keep things flowing. Because
I think it comes down to culture, and also I like the idea of a Pacific Alliance NASDAQ. So maybe you call it P, and it joins the new BRIC, which is Brazil, Russia, India, and Pacific Alliance. China is no longer a part of it, right? Now you call it the BRIP, or whatever you want to call it, right? BRIP. And now you're bringing up some of the LATAM countries that have had unicorns, like you said, into the game, right? To where they're being noticed as much as Brazil gets noticed when you think of LATAM. So that might actually be a fantastic initiative if it can work out. I know there's a Pacific Alliance for defense purposes, right? With satellites and just coalitions. There was some FTA, free trade agreements, but if you can set that aside and not try to create a European Union for LATAM, but create just a business market and forget about the politics side of it. Don't worry about changing currencies or any of that crap. It's just a market to provide liquidity for capital raising, like you said. Well, and if we do that, I think that might actually be an interesting concept.
That thing that would be fantastic, and I've always thought about something like that, and I don't think it's just me. I think that any Latin American guy who has studied in America in a decent way for a decent amount of time, and then you come back to your country, and then you sort of kind of get to know a little bit the American system, the American people, then it's very easy to imagine if you're Latin American, how, the US may benefit from making this kind of expansion. For example, NASDAQ and, free trade agreements, which were, or infrastructural agreements where you help to get help. But it's not so easy, I think, to look at it that same way if you are American. And I understand why that might be, because if you're a strong country, why should you bother? I mean, why should you bother, really? I never realized that Texas was twice as big as France until I was in America. And so people make funny jokes, right? Like you take an American guy and you ask him questions about France and the guy doesn't know shit. But when you are in America, then you realize, why should he? I mean, what is France anyway? I mean, it's Napoleon, champagne, and what else more is France to you? I mean, it's half of Texas. Why should I give a shit about that? And so maybe if I was born in America, I would be the same. But you kind of not realize that.
That's why the French hate us. And you think about Spain, all these tiny countries that literally are the equivalent of like Rhode Island or small states, right?
Exactly.
So when I look at governors like DeSantis from Florida, they could be Merkel in Germany. Like they're running their own country as a state. And that's how I see governors and the responsibility they have with their constituents. It's very similar to the European Union, right? You look at England and all that crap. And so, yeah, there is a reason why the West is the best, to be honest. And what I'm trying to get to is bring Peru to a platform that at least creates some awareness to the rest of the world, right? I think the Pacific Alliance thing is great because it keeps it on the same language, too. Like, people need to understand information and understand how they invest. And if you can adopt just proper policies like the SEC has or all the different regulations to get into like the NYSE, right? Chinese companies come to the New York Stock Exchange, Peruvians, obviously. But if, proximity is a big thing and there's a lot of leverage there. So if there's proximity in Colombia, well, then it's closer. And if you adopt all the lessons learned into this new market and call it the NASDAQ of Colombia, for example, like, okay, we're gonna be the NASDAQ of Colombia, and we're gonna adopt probably some very efficient technology attributes that the New York Stock Exchange, the NASDAQ, wish they had, right? But they can't because of all this pork barrel or red tape. But since we're a new kid on the block, we can adopt all this stuff. Imagine like, okay, it was a blockchain and everything was, decentralized and very efficient, and, costs were super low and efficient, and information was shared and archived and, quarterly, and all the proper, attribution and information sharing, like 10Ks, were at the same par, if not better, right? You'd weed out a lot of fraudulent stuff, because when they think of LATAM, they think of there's always corruption, but hey, the information's there. and we're a market for LATAM. And if they do well, maybe they'd entertain themselves to leave the LATAM Pacific NASDAQ and go, they're micro cap essentially. And now there could be a small cap in NYSE, right? Like there could be some graduation. But what you're doing is you're really fostering economic development, aren't you? Because you're providing liquidity, you're providing capital in a public market sense that allows companies to issue shares to raise stock at the end of the day, to keep the lights on and grow. That's all you're doing. And I think that's fantastic, because at the end of the day, what does all these startups want to do? They all want to go to Mexico or Colombia or Argentina or Chile to expand. So just create a SPAC and then just go into the market of Colombia. And before you know it, now you have everyone's eyes on you, and now you have the capital to scale, and you go do it. And either you fail or you're successful, and the market will tell you if you are, rather than using angel money and not going anywhere and nobody knowing about you. It's fantastic for marketing. It's fantastic for uniting local countries together and getting along on a business sense, not a political sense, because markets don't care about politics. And second of all, you've got all this technology that can be used for good that hasn't been used in other markets. And, you might get capital that's outside of Latin America. I might want to invest in the NASDAQ of Colombia just to diversify my portfolio, rather than buying whatever Lockheed Martin or whatever stock I had. Hey, you know what? I should throw it in here because it gives me more diversification. My correlation's lower, And now you're attracting institutional capital in a manner that actually has reasonable liquidity size that institutions would actually look at. They're never going to look at a Peruvian company in a Peruvian market because it's so unliquid. And if they were to invest in it, their mandate says, I have to invest X amount of lot size. And if I did that, I'd be an activist minority stake, and I don't even speak Espanol. There's no way a hedge fund manager is going to fucking do that. They can't do it. They have too much money to invest in such a small company. That's how it works. That's why you look at the S&P 500, 30% of those, 30 of those stocks actually move the S&P 500. Unfortunately, 75 to 60% of those guys are so non-liquid, or go to the Russell 5000, you go to micro, small cap. I feel sorry for some of these companies because nobody cares about them. It's so diluted, and that their stocks are so unliquid. So when you have somebody like GME or AMC or some Reddit post that goes and blows up one of these low float, small illiquid stocks, that's what happens. So it'll create more efficiency if you actually bring people to the market and create more liquidity and more awareness of cross-pollinating e-commerce. I think it's a fantastic idea. If you're running for Congress, I'd be happy to support you in that idea, and it'd be a great initiative for you.
I think it would be a fantastic idea. I think it would be a successful idea if it gets leadership support. I think that's the kind of idea that needs leadership. And I obviously think that the leadership should come ultimately from the US, because only if such an initiative comes politically, from the US, if it becomes policy of the US government.
I would say you need somebody like Bernie Madoff, the former chairman of NASDAQ, but that would be horrible.
Well, it doesn't really matter so long as the thing that they do works, because that's
no, I get it, but you know the joke behind him. But what I'm trying to say is, you need some luminaries, maybe that are Latin American, by the way, someone that's whoever. You're a Warden guy, you can find some Goldman Sachs or whoever, JP Morgan guys that are interested. And rather than look what they're doing analysis on companies that are, by the way, in the New York Stock Exchange, and wouldn't it be fun for them just to, contribute? I think they would sponsor an idea like this, right? Where
Well,
they could
it should
be
be.
analysts covering a local pack alliances. What do you want to call it? Pack alley market.
Well, I think what we would need, for example, imagine a world where an initiative like the entrepreneurship law that I'm thinking, like you teach entrepreneurship, modern entrepreneurship, from the first year of school, public school, even in the Andean communities, you teach them that. So these kids know what it is to make a business plan, what it is to be ambition, what it is to have a vision, what it is to aspire to have a unicorn, to make money with innovation. What the hell is NASDAQ? What is a unicorn to begin with? And so on and so forth, and how to put your business in the digital platforms. You will learn that thing. And you need such an initiative in the whole of the Latin American countries that are going to be part of this NASDAQ thing. Peru, Colombia, Chile, Mexico, public school entrepreneurship training. Secondly, you need political will. I mean, no matter what the governments are, left, right, there should be a commitment that that's the way to go. And then if you do that, then this whole thing about making the agreements, opening an office, opening a new portal, making the currencies somehow work within the system is trivial. That's the least of your problems, but it's never going to fly if you don't make it happen in the educational system, in the brains of the people of Latin America, the kids that are going to be, the next entrepreneurs. Those are the guys who should understand how to use those tools and who will use those tools eventually. If not, it just becomes an elitist thing, something that the guys like me understand and use in Bogota, in Santiago de Chile, but it doesn't get into the blood of the people of the country and the culture. So that political will needs to exist in the States, and that requires to change the paradigm of U.S. Latin American relations that was started by Theodore Roosevelt and all the guys who predated him. It hasn't changed, which is, speak softly and carry a stick.
Right.
And, I understand that that the context that Theodore Roosevelt had maybe sort of was conducive to such a policy. I think times have changed now. So if you add the population of Mexico, that's maybe 120 million, then Colombia is another 50 million, then Peru is 30 million, and Chile another 20 million. So that's basically 250 million people. So it's a population that approximates the United States population, and everything is going to grow in that population because we simply have to catch up. So it's big business. It's big fucking business. Everybody understands that. But you need to have a strong will from the United States, because there will be a lot of procrastinators, and there will be a lot of political opposition from many quarters in those countries we're talking about. They will like the status quo to prevail because they make money on the status quo, which is, business, and all kinds of things like that. So that's what you're standing against. That's what you're standing against. See what I'm saying? And it's like European Union, right? European Union. I mean, you had to have, two world wars for Europeans to sit down and say, well, we don't need to kick ass to each other forever, right? We may as well do things together. But even then, they needed the big guerrilla American US troops to finally make them, clinch an agreement. So I think in Latin America, it's a similar thing. We have countries that have been separated for 200 years, right? Colombia on their own, Peru on their own, Mexico too. It doesn't matter if we speak the same language. We have had different stories, histories. And so to unite that is not just a technological thing. It has to be a political will. There has to be a political policy from the US. And I don't think that the previous leadership or the current leadership has got any plans like that, which is interesting because if the US continues to have myopic policies towards Latin America, they're going to realize maybe too late that China is going to eat up their meal. China is already the biggest trading partner of Peru, the biggest trading partner of Ecuador. I mean, China is making big inroads in Latin American markets. And they don't need NASDAQ to do that because they adapt totally. For example, the informality of Peru. If you are an informal company in Peru, there is no way you are going to export your products to America. No way. Because the US is going to ask you a lot of requisites, right? Guarantees, quality standards. But you can export to China, no problem. No problem. China doesn't play by those rules. See what I'm saying?
Right.
So you got competition now. And it's not military competition like Russia. It's not military competition. It's smart competition from China. So I think the time for doing this is becoming sort of a countdown because the US still has got the upper hand still. I think if any president of Peru right now would see it in their own benefit and their own country to strengthen links with the United States. But it may not be the case in 10 years unless you get something like the NAFTA with us. Because, for example, Mexico is never going to go into China because Mexico is firmly attached to the North American markets, firmly attached. And they ate the whole of the appliances and auto market in the US. It's in Mexican hands. There's no question, which means they are integrated. But we have not. I mean, what market in the US we have got? I mean, maybe potatoes, maybe sort of, we haven't got big inroads. I mean, we like Peru, Chile, Colombia. And it doesn't matter right now, but it will matter very soon, you know? So I think that the US has to change policy towards the Latin American countries who have traditionally bet in support of the US, like Peru. We have always been the US best friend, except for maybe 10, 20 years, okay? But we have always been. Chile, even more so. Chile has been basically the good sort of housekeeper of the US in South America. And Colombia, maybe they got more military bases, the US, in Colombia than they got in Texas. I mean, it is the best friend of the US. So I think that that could be a great idea. So what you have in mind, I don't think it will work in a purely economical, technological context. It's a big idea. It requires the US to take leadership in these countries. Leadership which we don't have, by the way. We don't have any leadership in Peru. Our leaders
That's
are
a good
just
point.
clowns.
You know, that's a really good point. It's
Fucking
a
clowns.
good, I think it's a good point in terms of transparency in the market. Okay. How does it create transparency? It provides information to the populace, provides everyone that has a whatever interbank or whatever account to be able to invest. And also it could broaden the markets to where if there's an agreement with the US, you might be able to have Robinhood be able to invest in Latin American NASDAQ as like an interesting play, you know, where maybe there's some new crypto, Ethereum, whatever, out of Peru that just happened. But if it went to be, you know, that level, you can invest in that because you're creating this cross-border transparency, which is fantastic. I think the better thing is that you're creating a market that lowers barriers to entry because of this crap that you're talking about with China and having them pretty much show up with duffel bags of money and, hey, you can do whatever you want and play in our sandbox. That's not good for the overall global economy, right? It just isn't, because it just leads to eventually someone's going to have an issue or lead to fraud, whatever it may be. It's going to lead to maybe poor quality service products, just not correct. But if you had transparency in a semi-regulated forum where they had to submit information, and if it wasn't correct, the market would tank that stock, you know, and it would go bankrupt because of fraud or whatever it is. It allows more transparency, right, in the market, and in a market that has never had transparency, also has never had a voice, and it's an afterthought. Nobody really I'll be honest, when you're in the States, you just said that they're not thinking about France. Do you think they're thinking about Peru? That's way down the street, you know, like Peru doesn't even come up. France will come up before Peru, right? So imagine that to me is unfortunate. So this could be a means to bring up, you know, whether it's Panama or Ecuador or even Peru, whatever, up into a platform that at least gets noticed, and entrepreneurs from wherever you're at has an opportunity to at least go public in this market. And that could be a graduation into a bigger market if it made sense. If their product actually served that market, or if they just wanted more capital raising, it's another round. Where do these startups where do they exit? Do they exit the US public market? If you went back the last 5 years and looked at all the unicorns out of LATAM, where did they exit? Was it actually a SPAC, public equity, IPO listing? Was it? I don't think so. I can't name one company that actually went public in the US market out of LATAM. Can you?
No. Well,
a startup. I'm talking a startup. I'm not talking a Pacas Maya or a Intercore, conglomerate.
I'm sure there is one which we actually don't know, but it doesn't matter because it would be an exception to the rule.
Well, what happens is what's happening is this: they exit sooner than later. That's what that's happening, right? Like somebody like SoftBank comes in and maybe buys up a Rappi or something like that, and that's a Japanese guy that just created this venture fund or private equity fund, and he's listed in the New York Stock Exchange, but he has a ton of other companies, and so it's really diversified in there. It's not like a pure play exit, unfortunately. So the only one that I think has a chance as of right now is Nubank out of Brazil. And the only reason for that is that they speak Portuguese. They're in Brazil, and they'll be like the Square of Brazil. Now, will they be a competitor to Square or PayPal? I don't know. I don't know. But so to me, it's hard to see that. But if you had this NASDAQ of Pacific Alliance, you would at least have, the minor leagues of proper capital markets. When you have this fragmented market system where you got the Peruvian market, the Argentinian market, the Chilean market, you can still have all that. Why? Because guess what? Family offices, mining companies, like you just said, they're aligned to certain sectors like commodities. That's fantastic. When you're talking tech, and there really isn't that much tech to actually create a local Peruvian NASDAQ, you need to connect everyone together, and then maybe that's a springboard into the world, right? That's the way I can think of with respect to this tech, because that's what NASDAQ is. It's a tech. There's a certain mandate in terms of what goes into that market compared to the S&P 500 or Russell 2000 or 5000. It's typically meant for tech style startups, the NASDAQ. So if you create a tech for Pacific Alliance, I think that's interesting. I really do. And it also allows the SPAC idea to work out too, right? Your special purpose acquisition vehicle, where you can have a local Pacas Mayao or a local Romero family take one of these startups public in the Pacific Alliance market, because they'll invest 300 million or 100 million and under their name, and the goal is for them to merge, and then when they go public, they make 3-to-1 off going public, right? And that's how these SPACs are being created in the stock exchange right now, in the NASDAQ, by the way. So that could be possible. And guess what? You're already just seeing it in the States. So you could literally take all the lessons learned that's happening right now and just do it more localized with family offices that would love to make that easy money. And that's what's happening in the States. There's just billionaires that are just taking these companies public. It's either a hedge fund or a family office, a billionaire, and they're putting their name out there and they're saying, hey, we like this startup. Yeah, it doesn't have any cash flow. It's not traditional, but we see an opportunity to maybe compete with Tesla, and we're going to take it SPAC. And the risk is that people get their money back at whatever they invested it in. That's the risk. It doesn't actually go public. It doesn't merge. I haven't seen a SPAC so far this year that's been done well enough that didn't actually merge and go public and have some return. So, there you go. You could go with that model too, which unfortunately is mitigating. It actually is circumventing the private equity route, right? Traditionally, you go from venture capital, private equity for a few years, and then when it gets big enough, you may want to go public, right? Well, now what they're doing is they're saying, hey, these techie startups are so growth centric that let's throw them into a growth NASDAQ market and circumvent the whole private equity route, and we'll just sponsor them myself. Lance and Fuller is going to sponsor. I'll throw in a couple $100 million. The valuation's a couple billion. We'll get public equity to fill in the gap for shares. They go public. I get my return after a certain vesting period. I'll maybe be on the board, move on. And that company's public, doing its thing, tracking to whatever roadmap they talked about, that they've been talking about for a while. It's just they got public sooner. You could do that too, by the way, in the Pacific Alliance market. Why not? Because you said, hey, we're a Peruvian startup. We can copy and paste in Mexico, Colombia, just like we do normally. And we're going to have this valuation. And PIERO has got a ton of money sitting on the shelf there. And he's going to sponsor the SPAC to go public in this Colombian Pacific Alliance market. Everything's in Espanol. Everything's regulated, similar to the Constitution or the SEC of whatever. It's pretty transparent. We get public money, so anybody can invest. The only thing is, what's also cool about this is you start changing the culture for people. You know, you start saying, hey, rather than investing in real estate or saving your money, you're going to put it to work in these companies, right? You start changing the culture in terms of investing, because I know that's not part of the culture here. Is people don't really invest in equities because they're commodity companies, right? And the New York Stock Exchange is so far away that, you know, maybe you do or a handful of people do that are smart that know about that, but most people don't. So now you've brought it closer proximity, and now they can invest in local, you know, Latin American companies. I think that's pretty interesting too.
Well, I think actually I think that's a good way to round this whole thing, right? And I would like to finish by saying that when you are saying that we need a cultural change, I think you're absolutely right. I do believe that to get an idea like the one you and I are talking about right now, flying, you need a cultural change, not only in the Latin American countries, which will get the benefit of, you know, having something like NASDAQ in your big city, like for example Lima, that will give a lot of employment, that will make it a sort of a beacon of, you know, entrepreneurship. A lot of people would come to live here and start and do their startups, blah blah blah. But also you need to have that cultural change in the US also, you know, because I mean, you are talking, but to be fair, you are unusual in the sense that you are not told the American, but you're an American who have not only had exposure to, let's say, the South in Florida, but you are now what, 2 years in Peru right now? Maybe 2 years, right?
Yeah. Sí, claro.
And uh, in pretty tough circumstances. So you're part of a evolution here, and that makes you a changed person. You know what I'm saying? Hey, look at this guy, a changed person. So
yeah,
in the same way, I think many people, to be able to make that step, need to open their minds for a cultural change, which in due course could be massive. Now, maybe we should finish by having an optimistic thing, because I think we're ready. When I say we, I believe that the people are ready. Sort of, if I think about my American friends, whatever a statistical sample, however good or bad it may be, I think they're ready. I think they're open-minded. They want to have this kind of thing we're talking about. They would love it. And on the Peruvian side, I also think we're ready. And I would very much doubt the case if that was not the case in Colombia or in Chile or Mexico. So I think it's time to leave behind, you know, the nuances, right? Historical nuances that, you know, we may have had in this or that circumstance, you know, and write a new book. And this new book should be a lot better than the previous one, correct? But I want to say this, that the ultimate leadership for such a thing must come from the United States. You can have great leaders in Peru. You can have, which you don't have now, actually, I'm talking political leaders. You can have great leaders in Chile, in Colombia, in Mexico, but you cannot substitute for American leadership for such a plan right now. maybe the future is the future. I don't know what happened then. But right now, that input of leadership should come, and it can only come from the US. And it should be complemented and backed up, obviously, in the countries of the region. But until or unless we don't have that ingredient, it's gonna be, cuesta arriba. It's gonna be uphill. You know what I'm saying? And the forces of this thing are strong, but right now I think the forces for doing such a thing are in place. So I think it should be a worthy, definitely a worthy undertaking, right? And a fantastic one, because who could doubt that a united Americas, whatever shape it will take, will be the world leader? We have stopped dreaming about that, actually. The guys who dreamed that thing, George Washington, Simon Bolivar, are dead, many hundreds of years now. And nobody in our region has dreamt like that. Maybe it's time to start again, right? Because if you do the math from, the North Pole to Patagonia, maybe you have like 800 million people, maybe. It's a population the size of China, the size of India, the size of whomever there is out there. And it's got all the world's resources. The biggest oil fields, the biggest uranium fields, the biggest fisheries, the biggest water, fresh water, lakes, rivers, mountains, you name it. It's all in here. All of it is here. Even the biggest, dinosaurs were here. We're not in North America, by the way, unfortunately. The Titanosaurus was bigger than Tyrannosaurus Rex. Did you know that?
Oh, I did not know that.
It lived in Patagonia.
Oh, wow.
But whatever it is, we were the biggest ones. You know what I'm saying? So I think instead of making stupid adventures in foreign lands which are very far from home, I think maybe it's time to sort of, go back to our roots and start talking again, right?
Right.
So that's the thing. I think it's been an unexpected conversation, but a very insightful conversation, right? I mean, expats in Lima used to be about a lot more trivial things than, resolving the world's problems, right?
We want to make Peru great again. That's what we're trying to do, right?
But here we are, man. So you have led this program into this destination. So that's what it is, right? So very good, Lansen. So when do we see each other next?
We should do at least, maybe at least monthly. We should connect maybe sometime mid next month. Be good, or at the end of the month, just to catch up.
Next
see how
month
you're
is
doing.
in a couple of days. So next month is in a couple of days. So maybe we should get together again in a couple of weeks, and see what happens then and what we talk about then.
That sounds great. All right, Piero Morosini, 2021, El Congreso. Nos vemos.
Yeah, make great again. Yeah, nos vemos, Lansen. Yeah,
Ciao, ciao.
keep it up. Take care. Get social distance, and see you soon.
Gracias, hermano.
Ciao, ciao.
Ciao.